going to continue in our series that we've titled A Journey of Faith as we learn from the life of Abraham how to kind of follow God into the unknown. You know, we love when everything goes exactly according to plan, don't we? When we start a home improvement project and we only have to go to Home Depot once. Now, I've heard that this happened. It's never happened to me, but maybe in stories of old, I've heard that that has happened before. And so I'm excited for the day that maybe that, I will be able to just go to Home Depot once and be able to fix whatever that needed to be fixed. Or maybe that we go to the store and the thing that we want to buy is on sale, drastically reduced, on clearance, right? And we're going to save a bunch of money. We like that. When we plan a vacation months and months away, and when we finally come up to the vacation, it's perfect weather. When we go to college and we meet our roommate for the first time and all of a sudden we're like, oh, we like them, right? They're going to be our friends. They're not going to be our enemy. We love when everything goes according to plan, but we have learned in life that sometimes things don't happen always the way that we want. That sometimes life isn't exactly what we expect, isn't it? Several years ago, Debbie and I were planning a trip to Disney World, and we were excited to be able to take our kids there and to be able to enjoy the sun. We put a lot of time and tension. We spent a lot of money getting there to make this vacation exactly what we wanted it to be. We had every day kind of planned and picked out. We knew which day we were going to be at the parks, which days we were going to be at the pool, which day we were going to at the beach. We're in the Pacific Northwest. All of it's outside. All of it's in the sun because we're trying to soak up that vitamin D as much as we possibly can. But as we get closer and closer to the day to leave, all of a sudden we are hearing that a hurricane is coming off the coast. And there's going to be torrential downpour that's going to happen on our week, right? This is us having fun at Disney World right here. I'm the dad, like, kids, get out there, take a picture while I got the roof. I'm all dry. Let's throw them out there. You know, instead of packing bathing suits, we're packing rain jackets. Instead of packing pool toys, we're packing board games because instead of spending time outside, we're now trying to figure out how are we going to spend time inside. Well, we were obviously a little disappointed because this wasn't the vacation that we wanted or that we expected, but it's what happened. And as we follow God, it's that a lot of times it's that we expect that there's always going to be sunshine and rainbows, right? That if we just follow the yellow brick road, then it will lead us to the life that we've always wanted, a life that's full of comfort and convenience. And we get disappointed when things don't turn out that way. When all of a sudden a challenge arises, and I don't know about you, but sometimes when crisis happens, we start questioning our faith, and we start doubting the promises of God. And we start to wonder if bad things are going to happen, whether I live by faith or not, then what's the point? What's the point to continue to follow God? What's the point to be a part of this thing called faith? And so today I want to talk about how to have faith in the famine, because what we saw last week was that Abram leaves his country, he separates from his family, he denies his culture to go to a land that he doesn't know. And then after hearing all the promises of God, you would think that he probably believes that life is going to be a little bit easier. I mean, that life is going to be easy. He's going to, just be able to enjoy it a little bit more. And then as soon as he kind of gets into the land of promise, he's faced with a challenge. A crisis happens. Famine comes. And so I want to talk about that story today. If you have your Bible, I would love for you to turn to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12 as we look at how to have faith in a famine. If you don't have a Bible, you can grab one of those black Bibles in front of you, turn to page 9, and you can follow along. If you don't have a Bible, please take that Bible home as our gift to you. And as you're turning there, we're going to kind of separate our time into 3 parts. We're going to look at how to have faith when life gets hard, how to have faith when fear takes over, and how to have faith as we look forward in the future, okay? So let's take a look. Faith when life gets hard. We're going to read verse 10 of chapter 12. It says, "Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. So we immediately see famine comes, but it's not just any famine. It's not that this is just a little bit of a struggle, but that it's a severe famine to the point where Abram is now struggling to find enough food and water for his livestock, for all of his animals, to take care of his family. And so he's probably wondering, what is he going to do? And maybe he hears from some traveling merchants or from people that says, hey, the famine doesn't go as far south as Egypt. There's still resources there, so you can go there. So Abram says, okay, I'm going to pick up all of my stuff. I'm going to move my herds, move my family to Egypt. Now, this may not seem like a very big deal to us. He's a herdsman. He tends to go wherever there are resources for his herds. But what the author is trying to convey to us in this moment is by leaving the land of promise, he's leaving the plan of God. See, by leaving the land of promise that God says, I'm going to give you, to provide for you, to take care of you, he's now leaving the plan of God. And what we can see is that earlier on in chapter 12 is that Abram, everywhere he went, is that he talked to God, he prayed to God, he built an altar to God. He was demonstrating his faith over and over and over again. But now, as soon as conflict comes, as soon as adversity hits, we don't hear any more prayers. We don't see any more altars. Matter of fact, Abram says, I know what to do. I have a better plan to provide and to protect my family. We're going to pick up and we're going to leave and we're going to go to Egypt. See, Abram decides that in this moment of conflict, is that I'm going to trust in the circumstances. I'm going to trust in my plan. I'm going to trust what I can see instead of trusting in the promises of God. So often we wonder if God is going to call us into faith. If God is going to invite us to be a part of this journey, why does he even allow famines to come? I mean, why doesn't he just allow Abram to go into the land of promise and just bring rain? Like we know he can control the rain. Why doesn't he just make life a little bit easier? Well, sometimes God allows famines to come in our life to reveal our faith. Because adversity reveals our faith, doesn't it? And it's not that God wants to know how we're going to respond, because he already knows. He has perfect foreknowledge. He wants us to see how we're going to respond. He wants us to see the gaps and the weaknesses of our faith. He wants us to see who we truly trust when all of a sudden the comforts and conveniences are being stripped away. Because it's easy for us to think that we have great faith when everything's going well, doesn't it? I believe in God because I have bigger paycheck than I've ever had. My bank account is bigger. I have, everything's going well, and we think that we have faith. But what's happening sometimes in our comforts is that we're starting to lean, or we're starting to trust in careers, in finances, in relationships, in all these other things. And then when famine comes, all of a sudden we're forced to realize, to deal with who we truly trust. Because like Abram, famines are going to come in our life, aren't they? We're going to deal with stress from school. We're going to have that teacher that's going to give us that surprise quiz, or going to be harder than other teachers. We're going to have uncertainty about our careers. We're going to deal with struggles with our finances, problems in our relationships, disappointments in our health. And when the pressure hits, we have to decide, who are we going to trust? Because when we walk by faith, it's not that God is just going to make sure that famines never come or we never have any struggles. See, when we walk by faith, it's that we realize that God is with us every step of the way. Is that we can replace anxiety with the assurance of God's goodness. That we can learn that his wisdom and his power is greater than our strength and our control and our plans. That we can know that God has something good out there for us and that we can walk with him. It also teaches us a little bit more about who God is. I love reading stories about the disciples because even though the disciples walked with Jesus every single day, they heard his teaching, they saw his miracles, they saw all of these things, and you would think that being next to Jesus, that they would be avoidant of conflict. But the reality is that they face hardship over and over and over again. In this particular story, they're in a boat sailing across the Sea of Galilee when a storm hits, and immediately Jesus sleeping in the back, and they're trying to row, they're trying to do everything they can to correct the boat and try to get to the other side. It wasn't until the point where they are desperate, when they have no idea, they're facing death in their mind. They wake up Jesus. Jesus stands up, says, "Peace be still." And all of a sudden, I love the reaction to the disciples. Who is this? That even the wind and the waves obey him. See, when we go through famines, God reveals a little bit more of himself to us. And we get to say, who is this? That he's able to calm the storms. He's able to provide even in the midst of a famine. That he's able to do something great and miraculous even when all of the circumstances seem that it's impossible. See, when we put our faith in God, is that our struggles turn into opportunities for growth as we get to know him just a little bit more. Well, let's take a look when fear takes over. We'll start reading in verse 11. Now, when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, "I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance." Aw, right? That's cute. All right. Verse 12, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, "This is his wife." Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. So he's basically saying to Sarah, you are drop dead gorgeous, right? Like literally, like you are so beautiful that I'm afraid that they're going to kill me to get to you. So Abram immediately starts thinking about a plan. So let's hear his plan. Verse 13. "Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." So if you know a little bit about Abram and Sarai, they are half brother, half sister at that time. So he's kind of telling a half truth. But he says, listen, what he's really trying to do is he's trying to appeal to an ancient custom. Because back then, listen, you take care of if you kill the husband, then the woman is free to marry again. But if he is the brother, then he becomes the guardian to the woman. And that anybody that wants to marry Sarai has to go through Abram. Now, I believe is that Abram's probably thinking, I'm going to make the bride price for my wife so big and so difficult that it will discourage anybody who will really want to marry her, right? And so he's thinking that this is going to be a great plan, that he can be the gatekeeper, he can control this. No one's going to be able to afford this bride price. Well, okay. Verse 14. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So the one person who could call his bluff does. The person that is rich, more powerful, greater than anybody else, that could pay the bride price says, I want her. And Abram is sitting there going, uh-oh, right? Like, uh-oh, what? How do I play this out? Verse 16, and for her sake, Pharaoh, dealt well with Abram. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. So Pharaoh says, listen, we're going to be family. We're going to be family, so I want to do well by you. And so he showers Abram with all of these type of gifts. He's making him rich beyond what he's ever been, beyond his imagination, because Pharaoh's like, we're going to be brother-in-law, so let's start off well. And so he's giving Abram all of this money, all of this livestock. Now, can you imagine what Abram's thinking at this time? I'm richer than I've ever been, but I just sold my wife to another man. Like that is marriage counseling that I don't want to be a part of, right? Like that, when that conversation happens, I want nothing to deal with it. So Sarai's taken into Pharaoh's house, and back in those days is that what they would do is the woman would go into Pharaoh's home, secluded, away from other men, to make sure that she's not pregnant and prepared to marry Pharaoh. So they're waiting for that time period and waiting for that wedding day, and this is when God decides, okay, your plan has gone on long enough. It is time for me to intervene. Verse 17, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Okay, so we don't exactly know what happened here. We don't know the diseases or what plagues or how this all exactly kind of played out. Maybe God sends a plague to everybody in Pharaoh's house. Servants are sick. Pharaoh's harem, other wives are sick, like they can't get out of bed, whatnot. Maybe Sarai is the only one that's not touched. We don't know. But somehow it comes out that Sarai is already married, and that he's married to the guy that you think is my brother is actually my husband. Verse 18, so Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here's your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. See, Abram messed up in a big way. And all of this happened because Abram lived in fear. He allowed fear to take over instead of living by faith. What we see is fear is the enemy of faith. Let's face it, that when we live in fear, we make some really bad choices, don't we? When we decide to live by fear, is that we tend to magnify the uncertainties in our life. We tend to think about our problems bigger than what they are. We exaggerate them. We tend to use our mind, and we start thinking about all the what ifs. What if this problem is bigger? What if God can't save me? What if I can't get out of this trouble? What if this person doesn't come in time? What if? And we just spiral out of control. Ultimately, when we live in fear, is that we are magnifying our problem and minimizing the power of God. When we live in fear, we magnify our problem and we minimize the power of God. Fear also feeds into our insecurities, don't they? That when we live in fear, we start thinking about all of our inadequacies, all of our weaknesses. We start to think, God, does God really know me? Does he really understand the person that he's called? I'm like, I just messed up. Like I just made a mistake. I have failed in this area, but yet he's calling me to it again. Like, does he really know? And we start thinking about that, and we start questioning some of this, and we start becoming very insecure about ourselves, and we start, in our selfishness and our pride, we start putting ourselves before God. We also, fear limits our ability to move forward, because as God is calling us to something, all we can think about is failure. All we can think about is the problems. All we can think about is the risks and the negative outcomes. And so all of a sudden, instead of trusting God, we live in fear. God says, I want you to go. And all we can think about is the problems. And we say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. Don't call me into this, God. Call someone else. This isn't me. I make mistakes. I'm too weak. Call someone else. See, fear convinces us to settle for what we see rather than to trust God in the unknown. Fear makes us settle for what we can see rather than trust God with the unknown. Abram leaves Egypt knowing that he messed up in a big way. He put fear over faith. He jeopardized his marriage by selling her to another man, and he didn't demonstrate an example of faith to everyone else around him. He messed up so bad that Pharaoh says, leave. He deports Abram out of Egypt. He says, you are no longer welcome back. An entire country says, you are no longer welcome back here, Abram. Get out. We have to wonder that in this lowest of lows, in this humiliation that he's feeling, is he wondering if God is not welcoming him either? If he's wondering if God is saying, I'm done with you. Well, the great thing is that this is not the end of the story of Abram. That his story doesn't end in chapter 12. He doesn't say, wow, you really messed up, and so I'm going to go find someone else. But as a matter of fact, he says, no, God leans in, he rescues Abram, and he actually uses his mistake to accomplish his purpose. He uses Abram's mistake for his purpose. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to mess up really big today. Right? No one says, I'm going to try to destroy my life. I'm going to try to hurt the people around me. I'm going to just mess up. I'm going to have a moral decision here. And we don't say that. But yet, some days, we mess up pretty big, don't we? We allow fear to take over. We allow our insecurities to take over. We try to control, we try to make our own plans and try to manipulate and navigate and try to say, God, I know better than you. 14 years ago, I thought I did this. I felt like I was facing a famine in the workplace. I wasn't getting the things that I wanted. I didn't feel like I was getting called into the meetings, into the real meetings. My voice wasn't being heard. And so, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go somewhere else, somewhere that appreciates me. The grass is always greener on the other side. And so I thought, I'm just going to send out a couple resumes. I'm going to just see what's else out there. And immediately a church in Florida calls me. And they start telling me all the things that I want to hear. They start wooing me. They took my wife and I to box club seats at the Florida Gators game. They were rolling out the red carpet for us. They gave us the salary. They were checking all the boxes. And all the entire time is that God's saying, this isn't a me. This isn't mine. This is not what I have planned for you. But God, don't you see? It's so much better over here. The grass is greener over here. There's famine over here. I don't feel like there's life for me over here, so I'm coming over here. And I started pushing a little bit harder and pushing a little bit harder. All of a sudden, we signed some contracts. All of a sudden, we move our furniture down to Florida, and we're just about 1 week away from moving, and God says, I'm intervening. And he slams the door. He says, this is done. And like Abram, I walk back, humiliated, embarrassed, rejected. I've jeopardized my family. We're now no house, no job, not knowing what we're going to do. But yet what I love about God is that his plan is not dependent on our perfection, but on his power and his purpose. His plan is not dependent on our perfection, but on his power and his purpose. This means that while we may make wrong turns, while we may make bad choices, while we may do some things that are not of his will, it doesn't mess up his plans. That God can still turn them into good. See, Romans 8:28 says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are according to his purpose. See, God is saying no matter how bad you mess up, no matter how great your sin is that there is nothing that you can do that I can't redeem, for my grace is greater in your weakness. That this is where you see my power at work. And so we can walk by faith knowing that God is sovereign, that he is powerful, that he is in control, that no matter how much that sometimes we scream and fight and make mistakes, he is still at work and can use everything that we are doing. Let's look at how faith that looks forward. Chapter 13. Verse 1, it says, so Abram went up to Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him in the Negev. Now Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and gold, and he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. So Abram leaves Egypt. He's taken this walk of shame back. And he goes back to the place where he first built an altar, back to the place where he kind of first committed and demonstrated his faith in God and says, I trust you. And so we see this rededication of Abram, saying, I will now learn to live by faith and to trust in your promises. But isn't it amazing that as soon as we kind of get our heart right, as soon as we make this commitment, all of a sudden a challenge comes. All of a sudden another crisis comes our way. We say this in youth ministry all the time, right? Is that as soon as, we know that when you go on a mission trip or you go on a winter retreat or something and you separate yourself from all the noise and all the distractions and you have this beautiful kind of spiritual moment that you're reconnecting with God, just wait. Because as soon as you get home, challenge is going to hit. School's going to start. Problems are going to come. And it's going to be another test of our faith. But this time, Abram handles it very differently. See, as he comes back, the Bible says that he's very rich. Pharaoh showered him with gifts, made him very rich. This word in Hebrew means heavy. It means that he's loaded. He's loaded with gold and silver and livestock, right? He's richer than he's ever been. Again, showing how God uses even our mistakes to accomplish his purpose. Some people believe that there's 1,000 people that are traveling with Abram right now. All of his hired hands and all of their animals and livestock and everything else. And then it says, and Lot was with him. So now you have all of Lot's stuff too that's coming. So they come back to a land that's still recovering from a famine. There's Canaanites and Perizzites in there controlling the best parts of the land. And so they are kind of forced to deal with the scraps of all of this. Well, of course, there's going to be tension because you want food and water to take care of. As a hired hand, you're kind of evaluated based off of, are the animals healthy? So they're battling over, all of this limited stuff. There's tension, there's quarreling that's happening. And we can only imagine that this is all bubbling up to the top where Abram and Lot are starting to feel the tension of all of this. Abram goes to Lot, his nephew, and says, listen, I don't want quarreling to be between us. That we've gotten to the point where we're too big to kind of stay together, so we need to separate. So Abram brings Lot up to this high mountainous region. He says, I want you to look over all the land and decide which direction that you're going to go, and I will go the different direction. Now, this is crazy what Abram does here. Because by every social standard at that time, Abram should have had first pick. Abram should have been the one that decides where he's going to go, and Lot has to go somewhere else. See, Abram was older. Abram was the patriarch, the head of the household. Abram was given this land by God. Abram could have said, listen, look, Lot, everywhere you see, my land. You go beyond that land. You go, let God give you a different land. But this land, my land, right? Don't be here. Instead, he says, you pick. And Lot looks over, and he sees the best part of the land, and he says, I'm going there. And Abraham said, fine. Then I'll go to the other part. And Lot goes, and he leaves. See, Abram is able to make this choice because he's no longer living in his life in fear. That he now believes that the promises of God are not going to be fulfilled by his power, by his control, but by God's power and by God's control, by his will. See, Abram realizes that I can give this portion away and God's promises are still going to come true. Let's look at verse 14. As Lot leaves, the Lord said to Abram, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. See, God is coming to Abram and reassuring him that even though Lot has, you could say, the best portion. My promises are still true, that I am greater than this, and that everything that I promise is going to come true. Sometimes we live in this life where we feel like the best portions have been given to someone else. That we think, man, if only I could have had that position, if I could have gotten that raise or that promotion, if I was born into a rich family, if I had that rich uncle, and we think about all of these things, and if I got the best portion of land, then God could do something. No, God says, listen, my promises, whatever circumstances you're in, are still going to come true. You can trust me. You can believe in this. You can walk by faith. Verse 18, Abram once again builds an altar to God. When people back then built altars, they were demonstrating their faith. They were coming to him in worship, and they were showing that they were going to walk by faith, but they were showing everybody else that I believe in, I trust the God of heavens, the Creator God, the God of the promise, that I'm going to live and walk by faith. And we should have altar moments in our lives. We don't build maybe altars by stone anymore, but maybe these moments, these demonstrations of faith comes through our generosity, comes through how we respond in moments of crisis. Do we respond in kindness and patience, or in control and anger? Do we respond in fear or in faith? Maybe, we live out our life, and the way that we live it out is that we have our hands that are open, where God is just freely giving and taking away, and we say, God, I know that your promises for me are still true, that I know that you still have a plan and a purpose that's good, and that I trust in you. One of the ways that we demonstrate our faith is through communion. Because when we come and we take communion, it's that we are saying by eating the bread and drinking the cup, is that we are believing in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. That Jesus came, lived a life that we should have lived, died the death that we deserve to die, but in his love for us, he was our substitution. He died for us. But we also, when we take communion, we believe in the promise of his second coming. Because he says, as often as you eat of this bread, drink of this cup, you proclaim Christ until he returns. See, we believe that Jesus is coming back. We believe that Jesus is going to make all things new. We believe that he's going to, we are going to live with him for eternity and have this eternal relationship with him. And as we take communion, we believe in those promises. So as the ushers, are coming forward and they pass the plate, if you have not put your trust and faith in Jesus, we would just ask you for the plate to just pass by. We don't want you to do anything that your heart is not fully in. But if you committed and surrendered your life to Jesus, this is of you. We eat and we drink to the promises of God. Hold on to the elements. This is also a time for us to just examine our life, to see if there's any gaps or weaknesses of our faith that we may have. And then after a couple minutes, I'll come up and we will, out of show of unity, we'll take them together.